Welcome, coaches, to this edition of Give and Go Live. My name is David Newbury, and I'm joined by my colleague Ian Barker. Hello, Ian.
Hello, David. Pleasure to be here.
Very good, Ian. And today we're joined by Nate Williams, the ECNL Director for Carolina Rapids and also a member of the national staff for United Soccer Coaches. And this particular topic is the third in a series. It's looking at attacking transition. And we've moved in the first two presentations looking at small numbers building up to eventually 4v4, and now we're going to add in the phase of play in 2/3 of the field and eventually finish with a game. So Nate, let's talk about how you now transition the topic of attacking transition into this last phase.
Yeah, so now you'll see that we've started to get into some realistic numbers to help the back four start to get into midfield, and then the midfield to get into the attacking third. So starting with the back four, right back, right central back, left-sided central back. This would probably be the left back in there. The 6 would be a little deeper, and we've got one of the 8s in here as well, just offering a little bit of support in the middle, versus the 2 forwards, the 3 in midfield for blue, and then a deeper defensive player for blue. The red team objective are playing to the targets through the gate.
And Nate, what are these players up here?
So these players are going to be release players in the second part of the session. So once we start breaking the line into these players and they become live, these become additional players now that will resemble what we would refer to as the 2 9s in this system, to be outlet passes.
Okay, thank you. And let's talk now about the methodology associated with sequence 1.
Okay, so again, we've tried to be consistent with the start position of this and the ball being played in from the coach. So we really would, again, put the focus on the red team starting in a defensive shape and then having to open up into these wide spaces to make sure that we're creating enough space to be able to play through the lines, which is opening up the blue team to create the opportunities to play further up the field and potentially into the targets. As consistent with the previous sessions, once the ball goes into the target, the red team now become numbers down. So the blue team will have numbers up going to goal. If the red team win the ball back on the second phase of this, they do not play into the gates. They will play directly into the secondary targets, which would be the 2 9s.
So Ian, a lot going on this activity, waves of attacking and defending. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot here, I think, that is important to understand. So hopefully coaches that have been with Give and Go before appreciate that we use a numbering system. So the right back is the number 2, the right centre back might be the 4 or 5, so on and so forth. So if the numbers that Nate is referring to are not familiar to you, please refer to other Give and Goes and the more traditional numbering system we've been employing. Critically, when we play phase of play, ideally we can use 2/3 of the field. So you've got a midfield block, and then you've got a defending block for red and attacking block for blue. So we're trying to go through 2/3 of the field. That's an important part here. And the focus, as we've gone through this series of Give and Go, is our red team. How does our red team possess and disperse? And we've used the cones to give them a few markers initially to help these young players with where we'd like them to disperse, and obviously we'd remove those pretty soon. Having said that, the Blues have a wonderful opportunity to dispossess the ball and go straight to goal. Now, the blue team is not the focus of our training session, but they have a really great training session. So they're being used to essentially develop the skills of the Reds, but they're not just tackle dummies. They have an opportunity to counterattack to the main goal themselves.
So Nate, we've now followed the sequence through. The goalkeeper has passed the ball wide, and please pick up from here.
So once the ball has gone into the right-sided central back, as Ian said, at the 4 or the 5, breaking the line into and we touched on this in previous sessions, was the outside backs, or the 2 and the 3 playing higher in more advanced positions. The objective really is to potentially combine with one of the 8s to get out, or to allow the 8 to be able to play directly forward. Now, if we were extending this into a game, if this ball being played from the 8 into the space in the gate, the running would come from the central players, the central forwards or the 9s would be looking to get into those spaces. So again, as we're building into two areas of the field, potentially looking to get into that attacking third at some point in the session. But as Ian says, this is a really, really good opportunity for the team that you're not working with in the Blues to make the game truly realistic. And the objective for them is having enough numbers to be able to get to goal.
And the methods on this sequence, Nate?
So again, we're trying to start as much of the play from the goalkeeper as we possibly can. So the decisions from the goalkeeper, either rolling the ball from their hands, playing from their feet. Now, we've started each of these exercises with a ball into the central back. Doesn't always have to go that way. This ball potentially could come into one of the 8s, back into one of the 6s, and then looking to change the points and get out through the lines or even through one of the 10s to get out from there. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is to try and eliminate this first line of players as we break the line into these areas to be able to get forward into the attacking third.
And Ian, the back and forth nature of this activity lends itself perfectly for teaching the principles of attacking and defending.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's critical that coaches, as we start, at all levels, but once we get into the 9, 10-year-olds and we're playing some meaningful 7-a-side, have a real good grasp of what the attacking and defending principles are. I would be addressing these principles primarily, again, with the focus team, which would be the red. So how do we attack, offer width and length? How do we penetrate? But then when they lose it, I'd be addressing in transition, can they make the field small again? So again, the red team is all about dispersal and making the field big in possession, but equally, when we're out of possession, the red team should be contracting and making the field compact. So adherence and reminding the players of our really solid principles of play, I think, is critical through a session like this.
And Nate, let's now look at the final phase, the final sequence, and we're looking at the full game environment, 11 versus 11.
Yeah. So again, we've started this exercise with the blue team, with the goalkeeper, or even from the outside back into the blue team goalkeeper. And as Ian just touched on there, the defensive principles firstly become a huge priority here, because winning the ball back is the bigger priority. Once they do, now you'll start to see the real transitional moments of the red team starting to make the field a little bigger and filling those spaces. Maybe the central forwards coming in a little tighter to try and win the ball, and some runs from forward players to try and get out. But I think that as you start adding in the layers, the game itself will start to become a little bit more realistic. Now, ideally, this is for coaches who have access to, a full-size field to make it realistic. And these patterns and these objectives for the players once they get into possession shouldn't change, whether it's 7v7, 9v9, or 11v11. They should still be trying to maximize the space that they're trying to play in. And when they're defending, making the game as compact as possible.
And finally, let's talk a little bit about some of the methodologies you might use in the 11 versus 11 game, specifically coaching in the game methodology.
Yeah, so some of the key things within this exercise are now potentially being a little bit more direct. As the game starts to open up, it doesn't always come about playing short through the lines. Maybe sometimes the balls are bigger of nature, in the sense that we're trying to get players behind their back line. But ultimately, we're still trying to stay with the same principles that we were working with when we were 4 versus 0 right at the very, very start, when it becomes about the outside backs playing higher, the 5 and the 4 opening up, allowing potentially the 6 to come in and get the ball, just to unbalance the other team and to create a little bit of space in midfield.
Ian, as a concluding comment, can you now briefly discuss and connect for us how this topic of attacking transition has progressed from a very simple 6 versus 1 activity, or 6 versus 2 activity in a rectangle, all the way through to the 11 versus 11 game?
Yeah, when I look at the series of 3 presentations by Nathan, the first thing is a willingness to possess the ball. So the red team, or the team we've been focusing on consistently, be it 5v, 5v2 or 6v2 through the 4v4 plus 3, and then all of the other subsequent sessions has all been about maintaining possession. What we've got now is, when we look at the red team, we've managed to keep our back 4 intact, which has been a focus of the most recent sessions of developing from the back. If you weren't lucky enough to have 22 players in training, you'd still establish, as Nathan has suggested, formations, but you would have to then work out where you would sacrifice players to remain on your topic. So let's say, for example, I only had 8 per side, including the keeper. I might still keep a back 4 and include the 2 midfielders and 1 striker, and sacrifice some players up in another position. But to stay on my theme, I need to create the correct lines of teams based on the formation. And then, just importantly, coaching in the game methodology. This should be the time in training where the coach should pretty much find their fixed position and stay there. And this would not be a time to be freezing the action a lot. It would be a time to be coaching in the flow, reminding players of their responsibilities. And if I'm going to step in and maybe demonstrate something in the final game, it's going to be what we would call a natural stoppage. So I'm going to wait till the ball goes out of bounds and then make my coaching point. But certainly the final scrimmage activity does not need to be interrupted by the coach coming in and stopping the action.
Well, thank you, Nate Williams and Ian Barker, for your time and commitment today. And thank you, coaches, for joining us on this edition of Give and Go Live.